how can it be right that all of a sudden men are saying they're lesbians and we're called bigots for saying no, they're not?
But I'm also widening the bandwidth of how to be a woman.
Essentially, it's a gay rights charity attaching a lot of straight, cross-dressing men.
I get called a white cis gay guy all the time on my videos, which is now some sort of a slur.
So many people have made a good career out of it. Even if you've got this sort of dawning realisation that actually everything I'm saying is a load of rubbish, you're not going to hold your hands up and say, no, I've been completely wrong.
I have heard you guys described as a hate group.
They should not be called the LGB Alliance because they also do not give a shit about bisexual people. They don't really care about gay rights either.
She's a lesbian, absolutely in flight from the idea of being a lesbian. The fury, the pile-on from trans activists. Within 12 hours, the funder on Twitter announced, we've pulled it.
Kate Barker, CEO of LGB Alliance. Welcome to my podcast. How are you doing?
Hello. Hi, nice to meet you.
Yes, you too. So, thank you for joining me today. You're obviously the CEO of LGB Alliance. So I'd love to start with the LGB Alliance yourself as well, your backstory, all the way back to the beginning about how you guys formed the organization, and we can go from there. Yeah,
sure. So it was formed back in 2019. It wasn't me, actually. I was a bit late to the party. Mm-hmm. And it was Bev Jackson and Kate Harris. And they kind of spotted pretty early on that there was something a bit sinister going on. So the LGB Alliance was formed in desperation because they were trying to get in touch with the big legacy gay rights organisations like Stonewall and say, look, hey guys, how can it be right that all of a sudden men are saying they're lesbians and we're called bigots for saying, no, they're not? You know, how can this be happening? And about that time, I remember a couple of things that I noticed as well. Do you remember there was a guy called, what's his name? Alex Drummond, beardy guy.
Yeah. Yes, I know what you're talking about.
A regular guy he used to like he favoured a kilt, and Stonewall was sending him into schools to tell children like what a lesbian was.
I'm Alex, I live just above Cardiff. I am a trans woman and I live full-time as a trans woman, but I'm also widening the bandwidth of how to be a woman. If I'm fixing the car and I've got my boiler suit on, that doesn't take away my femininity. I can actually be a trans woman fixing a car. Women are allowed to fix cars too. You know, the idea that to be accepted as a woman, I'd have to surrender my body to medical science to make it conform to, it's sort of offensive, really. You know, I spent years trying to pass as male, putting on a front, doing hyper-masculine things. But it was just a facade.
I mean, all these things, all these crazy things were going on. And Kate and Bev were desperately trying to, get back in touch with Stonewall and say, what's happening? How can we work together? No debate had already launched. So kind of in desperation, like half a cry of rage and half a cry of desperation, they got together a load of interested people and said, right, we've got to do something about it. And then they were off. And then my involvement was a friend of a friend knew I'd be interested. You introduced me to Kate and Bev, and my background is in marketing and brand. So I've had my own brand agency, had it for a number of years. So they asked me to come in and do some things around tone of voice and around look and feel of how everything was put together. So really excited to be asked, really flattered to be asked because, those two women are just incredible.
Yeah.
And then slowly did more and more. And now I'm actually employed. I'm actually an employee. I'm in charge. I'm the boss.
Nice. Thank you. So with Stonewall pivoting to trans activism, I was wondering, do you have any knowledge on sort of what were the key moments that changed? And am I right in saying, was there anyone from Stonewall that left and then got involved in LGB Alliance, or is that something I'm making up?
No, you're not making it up at all. So Kate Harris actually was a big, she worked for Stonewall for a long time. She was not for them, but she was a big fundraiser, really successful for them. She even, when Kate had her civil partnership, she said, no presents, I just want donations to Stonewall. She absolutely loves Stonewall. She was, I know. So the betrayal, I think, is been really difficult to take. But there's other key characters as well, from like Simon Fanshawe is somebody else who was one of the founders of Stonewall, comes along and speaks at our conference. I think the turning point was 2015. Gay marriage was on the books. Everything looked rosy. We'd all had it really good for at least 10 years. Honestly, it was the best country in the world to be gay, thanks probably a lot to the work of Stonewall. And then, you know how when organisations get quite big and they had tons of staff and millions of pounds of income and loads of big fancy dinners where people would pay £10,000 a table to come, and it was kind of everyone wanted to be involved with it. And rather than say, do you know what, we need to scale things down a bit because, just to make sure everything ticks along and that we don't lose any of our rights. But they didn't want to, so they wanted to do something different and had two choices. It was go international or add the T. It's been pretty well documented that at the time they said, we know there are going to be some casualties here, but we think it's worth it. So it was a calculated kind of decision. They thought it through. What would it mean if a new group of people were attached to LGB who maybe some of the rights would be in conflict or maybe would have different interests? Maybe a lot of them are going to be straight. That was weird.
Yeah.
Essentially, it's a gay rights charity attaching a lot of straight cross-dressing men. What could go wrong? What could possibly go wrong? Everything that anybody with any sense thought could go wrong has gone wrong. And unfortunately, they're really defending that position. They're in a kind of an ideological cul-de-sac, I think. They said absolutely a trans woman is a woman, and that's so absolutist. There's no retreating from it. And I'm interested in that as well because my background is brand, and I've always loved all their slogans and thought they were absolutely brilliant at it. Some people are gay, get over it, fantastic. So my pet theory is that trans women are women was a slogan which was meant to be a shorthand for trans people deserve respect, equality, just like everybody else. Instead of treating it as a slogan, they took it as policy. Like you might say, Red Bull gives you wings.
Yeah.
You know what that means. It gives you a lift, gives you a zip. If Stonewall were using that, they would be swearing blind. It meant you had, feathers sprouting. Literally, you could literally levitate. And it's. I think they made it into a literal thing, and I'm sure they're regretting it. I'm sure there's tons of people still work there who are sensible, who think, oh, how are we gonna get out of this hole? I know they've just got a new CEO. Maybe he's going to try and do something about it. But it's a shame because they were a fantastic organisation, and many of the rights that we have today are directly down to the brilliant work of Stonewall, which is why it's so disappointing, really, for everybody. And everybody relied on them and gave them money and rattled tins and volunteered and all that kind of thing, to see it just disappear really up its own backside in a really depressing in a way that hurts gay people as well. It's not just about possibly becoming a little bit irrelevant. It's about actually turning on those people who you were set up to support in the first place, which is really, really hard to process and compute.
Yeah, God, it's just a shame what's happened to the legacy. Do you know was it a situation of some trans activists had kind of managed their way in there as employees and, started it from the inside? Or was it, I'm wondering when the concept of LGBT started at all, because I think I remember even as an adolescent, I'm 30 now, talking about with my friends saying, yeah, I'm not really quite sure why it's all together because I don't want to be the other sex. It seems odd to me. Was it kind of an acronym that we used colloquially for a long time and then they just kind of adopted it?
I don't know. If we did, it kind of snuck up on me and I didn't realise. I'm a lot older than you, and I can remember people saying, why do they want to add the B? not just the T. I can remember because it was the lesbian and gay charity, and people were like, "Well, bees, they're as much, as interesting to the other side as they are to ours." Now I think that
Yeah.
pairing 100% makes sense because it's all bisexual people are persecuted because of their same-sex attraction, not because of their opposite-sex attraction. So, we all do belong together. But, the T, it's very different though, wasn't it? I can remember going out clubbing and there was always a couple of guys there who were cross-dressers, but they were always gay, super effeminate guys.
Okay. Yeah.
Completely different. They were gay men.
Yeah.
And what I never ever saw was a cross-dressing transvestite in a gay space. They didn't like gay people. They weren't gay. They felt they were not the gay. They were, slightly disdainful of us and our lifestyle because very often they were straight men and they were married.
Yeah.
And they were wedded to that, heteronormative lifestyle and their families. It's when you look at how history is being rewritten to suggest that trans people are at the forefront of winning the rights that we enjoy today, it's almost too absurd, especially when we're kind of talking about 10 years ago. It's not our grandfather, we didn't hear it at our grandfather's knee,
Yep.
About this history. But, we were there, all adult people over 30 were there, we know. So that's this rewriting of history, and it's a kind of an upside downing of truth and lies, and it's a really, really confusing. Must be very confusing for young people, I think, people that are just coming out particularly.
Yes. Well, it's sad what's happening to young people because now I think being gay is not seen as trendy and interesting and as oppressed. I get called a white cis gay guy all the time on my videos, which is now some sort of a slur. My opinion matters less than the black trans woman, black non-binary person. And It's a shame seeing, it's like every mainstream gay person now is kind of inching towards either being a fully they, them, like Sam Smith and those people, or they kind of do the he, they, and it's kind of anything. A lot of them, this is obviously not all gay people, but it's anything they can kind of do to just inch themselves a little bit away from the sex binary, which is now seen as, inherently oppressive and reductive, right?
Yeah, totally. And I think many of those people don't believe that they're a they, them, any more than you and I do. But people want their tribe, don't they? And they've identified that maybe this is the tribe with the loudest voice, or the one that they most want to identify with. And maybe some people find that attractive, that kind of people like new things. People like to consider themselves to be progressive, for example. Yeah. And a lot of gay people think or seem to believe that it's progressive and that it's the next gay rights, and only an old dinosaur would possibly dare to stand up against it. But I do think the new generation of kids who are coming through now are going to really shake things up, because it's only anecdotal, of course, but I hear a lot that young people are completely rolling their eyes at all the non-binary, gender neutral, kind of stuff. They think it's all a bit ridiculous. And one of the reasons for that, I think, is that it's not a grassroots driven movement like the old gay rights movement was.
Yeah, that's right.
If something's printed on the side of a police car, if like the local plods are all prideified up and they're all, got trans pride on it, it's kind of, it sucks the cool out of it. And whereas being gay, I first came out, I was 16 when I came out in like the late 80s. And people still kind of looked a little bit askance at you, and it was still a time when people could be sacked for being gay, no questions asked, and you absolutely didn't have equal rights. but it very much felt like within the community there was such a solidarity. I mean, loads of my friends went off to Manchester to protest, Clause 28. And none of those people, when I look back at it, had really the remotest interest in politics. All we cared about was going out clubbing and just like drinking too much and, everything else, really. But there was a sense that people could be energized by this because they really felt, wow, it's a real unfairness. The sort of non-binary kids don't really have much to push back against. It must be infuriating, actually, if you're trying to be edgy and progressive, and then a policeman comes along and his car's decorated with with your flag. It must be just mortifying when and they don't. And I think it's a very middle class movement as well.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. I mean, there's definitely some examples of kids who've even ended up at the Tavistock from working class towns. I think mainly due to the kind of social workers that they're being exposed to. But I do agree. I mean, it's not a coincidence that so many celebrities just happen to have a trans kid or two trans kids or a non-binary kid. And, people use an analogy of this and the gay movement, but in so many ways it's the opposite, right? Because I feel like the gay rights movement was a bit like, born this way, stuff you, leave us alone. And, had a much thicker shell to sort of what they were putting out there, and that they didn't need validation. And like you said, it was kind of apolitical in regards to anything else. Whereas this is the complete opposite. This is all about victimhood, oppression. You need to validate me. You need to, I think they see being accepted as actually being celebrated and put on a pedestal. And now queer and this whole movement, it's not just that, it's, kind of far left ideology, anti-capitalist, queers for Palestine. It's become so much broader than that. Even I see gay people, I went to Pride this year interviewing people, and there was one lesbian woman with the, fuck the Tory earrings. And, it's become now there's zero diversity of thought. But I think what you said about kids revolting over it is really interesting, because I didn't really know that. I think, if I speak to teachers, some of them say, yeah, there's at least like one or two trans identified kids in every class. What age are you kind of talking about, people who are starting to say, this is BS? Subscribe to my Substack, Jack Jewell Uncut. This is where you will get my full, uncut, untamed, and unashamed takes too controversial for YouTube, including early access to all videos, a private members chat where you can talk to me, and bonus footage seen nowhere else, including this episode.
I know more women with children than I know men with children, but are really afraid of challenging their children on this issue.
I'd like to ask Kate if LGB Alliance plans to launch any publicity supporting the separation of LGB from the T.
Well,
with the success of LGB Alliance, do you see any big LGB-only organizations growing in the future? Link on screen and in the description.
People just we're just coming into university, so I've got lots of friends with kids who are 18, first off to university, and a couple of examples I've heard where the teacher has said at the beginning, let's go round, the lecturer, let's go round and share our pronouns. And a couple of the kids have said, I don't believe in that. And then all the kids after them, so, they're sort of dutifully saying their pronouns, get to one kid that says, I don't really believe in it. There's no negative, there's no gasp from everybody. But most of the kids then after that kid says, oh no, I won't, thanks. Or.
That really gives me hope, I think I've heard before that, the millennials, unfortunately, which I'm part of, kind of were rebelling with woke. Obviously, older people too, but I hope that the younger generation are going to rebel against woke to bring us back to kind of reality or a slightly more conservative policy, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think so. It's really, well, I think it'll stick in academia for the longest. I think it's going to stick around in the big corporations and in academia, partly because so many people have made a good career out of it. And if your mortgage depends on it, even if you've got this sort of dawning realization that actually everything I'm saying is a load of rubbish, you're not going to hold your hands up and say, no,
That's
I've
grim.
been completely wrong. Fire me now. I can't pay my rent, can't pay my mortgage. People's lives depend on it. They're totally invested in it. All these consultants that are going into the NHS and all these organisations. So I think it would be really difficult to root out there. Academia too, partly because it's this queer theory.
Yeah.
It's been around for absolutely ages. It was just an obscure set of ideas, and it seems that the circumstances are absolutely just happened to be right. The sort of stars aligned for it to be able to land. And I think that was things like COVID. So everybody was at home. Everybody's lives suddenly moved much more online. People were more easily influenced by things like that. But it's this whole postmodern idea that language shapes the world rather than reflects the world.
Yeah.
And that's quite empowering if you're at home. It's quite empowering. It's quite an exciting idea if you're young, if you're a kid.
So back to the LGB Alliance, I'd love to kind of hear a bit about what are the kind of key pieces of work you guys have done, or as well what you're currently working on.
Yeah, sure. Well, I think we've been talking about kids, really. The stuff around children, we've been really successful at, I have to say. So we were the first organisation to really highlight that most kids that end up at a gender clinic, if you left them alone, they'd be gay. Like, they're non-conforming kids, they're gay. Boys are going to be gay, happy, well-adjusted gay men, and the girls are mostly just going to grow up to be lesbians. Yep. And their sort of gender non-conformity has been turned into a condition to be medicalised by people who are cynical, who don't have their best interests at heart. So we worked really hard on campaigning around that issue, basically saying, to be gay is not a condition that you need to be treated with drugs and surgery. So I think the ban on puberty blockers, I mean, not entirely us, but we played a decent part in it. And I'm really pleased as well that we've managed to be able to help to ensure that the Labour government has continued with that as well. Because in the run-up to the election, we weren't so sure. But we're really happy with that. Wes Streeting, especially as he's a gay man, he absolutely gets it, and he comes at it from a position of real compassion for children as well. So that's like a big few. But all the stuff.
He's definitely probably the only person in cabinet I like so far. But I wish he spoke about it more. He kind of has confirmed that the ban is done, but he could easily come out and give all the reasons why, and the gay, highlighting the scandal. And I feel like he's kind of done it, but maybe I'm wrong, but I have not seen anything like that from him. But I think he knows that if he were to be really vocal about all the reasons behind the decision, because he's obviously well informed now, he would then get an onslaught of trans activists.
Right? Yeah. I mean, he absolutely knows his stuff. And I think in the run up to the election, the trans activists were pushing for gender affirming care, as they call it, for kids.
Yeah.
They wanted self-ID, and they wanted a ban on conversion practices. So there were those three. And I think he selected the medicalisation of kids as being the most consequential, the most serious to act on. Self-ID, I don't believe they'll touch, because everybody sensible hates it. It's just a terrible idea. And conversion practices, we're yet to see what's going to happen there. They said within the first 100 days they would have it passed. So I'm thinking possibly it's just been kicked down the road as well. So I think he's pretty good. But, we're continuing with our work. I mean, as well as our, we'll do press campaigning and things like that. We do a lot of behind the scenes, trying to have meetings with MPs and meetings with ministers and putting forward evidence and taking part in consultations. So there's a lot of work going on, and broadly speaking, I'm feeling pretty positive about that. So I think that's good news for kids, I think. And then other stuff we do is, how how great it is when you get in a room and it's all like gay people and how fun it is. And there's kind of, there's like a real camaraderie, but there are so many fewer gay spaces now, particularly like there aren't any for women. And
Yes.
again, it's a COVID thing. All the lesbian spaces are being invaded by weirdy blokes, who should not be there. So one of the things we've done is we've set up this network, which is growing really fast and really easily, which shows to me that it's needed, of friends groups. So all around the country, like furthest north one is in the Isle of Skye. I don't think it's a very big friends group, that one, but like it's far. And they are all, the only criteria is you have to be lesbian, gay or bisexual to be in it, any political hue, and people just get together and like go to the pub or go to a gallery or go camping, and people just absolutely love it. The kind of sense of relief that you're in a space where people are, there's a range of different people and different types, but there's nobody crazy, generally speaking, in the group. And, you don't have to watch, you don't have to like share your pronouns when you get there, and you don't have to be affirming people in all their craziness. And so we do that. So that's our network of friends groups. And it's really growing quickly. People really love it. And we set up a helpline, and it's the only helpline in the UK, astonishingly, which exclusively supports children and young people who are same-sex attracted or coming to terms with the idea that they're thinking that they might be same-sex attracted. All lesbians, gays and bisexuals running it. And anybody that rings up will know that they're not going to be, if a girl is a bit gender non-conforming, they're not going to suggest a breast binder. That anybody answering the phone believes that sex is binary and they believe in biological reality. It's a listening service, and we're not there to try and convince any kid that rings up and says I'm trans that they're not, because that's not, we're the service will listen to hopefully and help every child that's struggling. But it is amazing that there's only one in the whole country. And that's so we're really proud of that. It's kind of a live text service. It's kids to prefer to text rather than speak. But over the next year, when we finished our pilot, we might expand it and put some phone lines in as well, and have increased opening hours. But it's really interesting seeing some of the contacts that are coming through and what kind of thing people are asking. We have had a couple of, so we won't go into any details, but from girls who are looking to detransition, who are quite young, just because they've changed their mind, and it just all feels a bit awkward having to do it now.
Is that socially?
Yeah, just socially transition.
Yeah.
So girls that maybe their parents haven't allowed them to take any drugs or anything, but they've taken on a boy's name and they get their friends to he, him, and then it's just really embarrassing for them to then have to go and say, actually, I'm stopping that now, because we all do really embarrassing, silly things when we're teenagers. And generally speaking, you don't have a load of adults around you applauding you and telling you how marvellous you are and how great it is, and how generally they're like, you're an idiot, you'll grow out of it. And you say, I won't, but you do. But, it's embarrassing, isn't it? And that's like, I think people underestimate the power of mortification and embarrassment when you're a teenager, because everything is embarrassing anyway. So, we need to, I'm really pleased that one of the things the new government's announced is this detransitioners unit that they're going to open hopefully next year.
Yes.
First one in the world, I think. And that will be really interesting. I think what's interesting to me about that is that lots of girls, particularly, even if they are happy with their transition, maybe they thought it was the best thing they've ever done, will still have a range of medical complications and things that they need to think about that they won't be able to get checked up at the GP or a normal doctor.
Yeah.
But it'd be really kind of hard to get a girl who's happy with her transition through the doors of a unit which is supposed to be about detransitioning. So I think they've, in terms of positioning it, I'll be interested, to see how they do that. But it's pretty brave, and it'd be good to be first. I mean, we do a lot of things first on.
I was going to say, yeah, I'm very,
Islands.
I'm proud. I'm from Ireland, and I wanted to come here since I was young, and obviously that was, probably similar a little bit here. I think Ireland was further behind though in terms of my experience growing up and the difficulties I faced. So I always couldn't wait to move to England, and I've been here 11 years. I love living here and not going anywhere, but I am proud that we are at the forefront of this movement in regards to, legislation that we've passed, and just some amazing figures as well. Your J.K. Rowling, Maya Forstater, Helen Joyce, all these people, yourself, of course. And I feel like the UK is just determined not to pipe down about this, even though they keep trying to intimidate us to do so. And I really, really hope, maybe you'll know a bit about this and the progress for, before Labour got into power, they had that draft guidance for schools on the, teaching of gender identity ideology. Do you know, is that something you lobby the government for as well?
Yeah, we did. We did quite a bit of work on that. And the change of the sort of abrupt election was a bit of a shame because it was in progress. But a lot of things had to be sort of quickly cobbled together and rushed through. So I'm not sure what the new Education Secretary's commitment is to ensuring some of the basics, really, that teachers need to know that if a child wants to transition, it cannot be at the expense of every other child in that school. I think that's the key thing. That was the key shift. So pre the guidance, the sense was, I think, in schools, and I feel sorry for the teachers because they didn't have much support. The sense was best to be kind, best to go along with the child, let them use the toilets that they want to, let them get changed in, with the opposite sex kids. They didn't really have any support about what to say to the rest of the kids. And what the guidance at least did was say the rights of all the children matter, that social transitioning isn't just a passive act. It can lead on to, it can begin a pathway to having to change gender, which is much more significant. But it didn't make the school compel all the other kids to confirm the delusion of one child. Again, that's kind of really characteristic of this movement, isn't it? That one person's delusion or one person's way that they identify, and there's a sort of compulsion to try and compel the whole world to agree that falsehood is in fact true. It must be a very tiring, must be exhausting, actually. That the guy that films himself eating, and then all the waiters say, "Thanks, sir," and he gets all across. He's chomping away. He's like the most manly eater I've ever seen. He really shovels it down. But it must be, if your life is made up of all those sort of micro interactions where your key concern is making other people affirm something which is not true. And I've thought about it a lot because I'm a lesbian, and whether you believe that or not really is of no consequence to me. I still am a lesbian, whether you believe it or the whole world. I mean, it doesn't matter. But yet somehow a trans-identified person feels that they don't exist unless I publicly affirm them. They need that affirmation in order to survive. It's almost as if being trans cannot be real unless it is publicly acknowledged. But being gay is just being gay, whether people know, whether it's secret, whether they believe it or not. So I think I find that interesting, that contrast, difficult, and how fragile you must feel. Constant alert of having to, not just whether people notice, but whether they approve of you.
Exactly.
And you must on some level not, have some difficulties with your perception of self, and not be, I feel like a terribly happy, well, clearly a terribly happy person to start with. I think anyone that encourages people along this path is really unkind, and I include sort of parents and friends and family who might go along with that as well. Much harder to say something truthful to somebody, especially if it's someone that you love and you care about. But in the long run, much better to do so.
Yeah, I completely agree. Again, it's opposite, because I guess for us, our fear would have been, I hope nothing negative happens to me. Like, I hope someone doesn't insult me or beat me up. Whereas their fear is everyone has to give me positive action. You know, it's not a neutral, I can co-inhabit a space with a religious person that disagrees with gay marriage or something. As long as they treat me respectfully and kindly, it's irrelevant to me at this stage. So I know that everything you said about the LGB Alliance sounds so wholesome, but I have heard you guys described as a hate group. And I know that you've faced struggles from trans activists and, you know, possibly legal challenges too. So would you be able to give a bit of an overview, or if there's any one particular story that's particularly shocking, you could bring me through that one?
Well, they're all a bit crazy, really. I mean, I suppose, like, they come in different types. So you've got the ones who'll turn up outside an event. So that will usually be a crowd of men, and then maybe India Willoughby will come as well, just to add a bit of colour. So there's usually like one celebrity in the middle of it, and they'll come and shout and scream. They don't tend to hang around very long, though. They don't have a lot of grit. And they're never, you know what I mean? They'll drift along mid-morning, so they're never there when the event starts, and then they'll drift away before the end. It's a poor show, generally speaking. And then, of course, there's all the keyboard warriors who, so what they do, they used to do it more, and it's dropped off a bit, but they would complain to tickets platforms where we were selling, you know, they do a mass pile-on so that we'd be kicked off a ticket platform, or they would complain to Twitter or to Facebook or whoever and get our account blocked. And then they started writing to the Charity Commission, which wasn't great. And I think the worst kind of, I found this quite shocking, was we were, for the Queen's Jubilee, we wanted to make a film about gay men. I think it was like in the last 70 years, in the Queen's reign anyway. And it was talking to men for whom it had been illegal to be gay, and then talking to young men, and then sort of cross conversations about it. It was a really, really lovely idea for a film. And we applied to the part of the Arts Council, and we did a really good application. They thought it would be fab. And they said, yeah, we'll give you £10,000. Not very much, but, you know, we're a small charity. We were really delighted. So I went onto Twitter and was like, hey, amazing. We're going to make this lovely film about gay men's experiences of, you know, battling homophobia, but, you know, over the Queen's reign, blah, blah, blah. And the fury, the pile-on from trans activists, you know, and they all rallied together and they piled on this. And we'd announced it at the same day as it was the Community Fund, as the Community Fund had announced it as well. They announced all their awards on the same day. So they piled onto their Twitter feed. And within 12 hours, they announced, the funder on Twitter announced, oh yeah, no, we've pulled it. Didn't tell us.
Oh gosh.
They'd already sent us the money. It was already in our account. And we had quite a bit of back and forth about that, but and we considered taking legal action, but, you know, we don't have money to take organisations to court. And so essentially we crowdfunded the money. We made a lovely film. And in fact, we're showing part of it at our conference.
Oh, right. Yeah. I can't wait to see that.
You'll see it. It's great. It's so moving and, you know, really captures the sort of spirit of what gay men went through. And it's got stuff about, you know, HIV and AIDS and things like that, and people's real reflections. It's a lovely film. It's so nice. I can't believe all those horrible trolls were, you know, would do anything to shut us down. But I suppose the worst thing, of course, the worst thing that happened in the list was the action by the Good Law Project, Mermaids, LGBT Consortium, and Transaxual to close us down effectively, to strip us of our charitable status. And I think it was driven by the Good Law Project, and the others
They're crazy.
were dragged in. When they announced that they were taking this action, press release flashed up. We saw it on Twitter, and it said, LGBT Consortium, Mermaids, blah blah blah, and it had Stonewall on the list as well. And then less than a minute later, that press release went down, and it reappeared up without Stonewall. So Stonewall were part of that original action, unless it was a typo. I find that hard to believe. But I think someone at Stonewall thought, yikes, this is a really bad look. One charity trying to shut down another charity. Let's abort. And it seems they really did the right thing, because that court case, I don't know if you followed any of it, the purpose of it was for all the witnesses to be able to troop up and say how hateful we are and how awful we were. But what happened is they all stood up and completely beclowned themselves. They were all looked underprepared, idiotic, crazy, and all were liars. And as a consequence, soon after, there was a regulatory review by the Charity Commission. It's been going on for 2 years. Their chair has been booted out. Their chief executive has been booted out. Half of their trustees have resigned. And that's all because they could have carried on under the radar doing their whatever they do. But they thought, so there is a little bit of schadenfreude there, that their effort to destroy us actually exposed their own misdeeds to the world in such a public way that they couldn't bear the sort of weight of public scrutiny. Because until then, everyone just thought they were fine and they were helping poor kids. And
what was their main accusation towards you? Just that you're hateful towards trans people and want to take trans people's rights away? Was that the kind of
that was the thrust of the argument? But the kind of key plank of the of the court case that the whole thing sort of pivoted around was that they said we never do anything charitable, that we were not really a charity, we weren't really here to support gay people, that really we were a campaign group and we'd only applied for charitable status as a front, and we were some kind of sinister organisation controlled by other people that were doing anti-trans activism. And again, they just looked like utterly foolish with with all this kind of thing. And I tell you what, there's some good old-fashioned sexism as well, because Kate Harris and Bev Jackson, they're not like spring chickens, they won't mind me saying. And Jolien Morn of the Good Law Project went up to Kate and said to her, so, who's behind this? And she said, what do you mean who's behind it? It's me and Bev. And he said, no, there must be some other men or an organisation behind you. And it was a real just sexism and ageism. He couldn't possibly understand how these two women had mustered so much support and managed to start to topple these giants like Stonewall and all these organisations that had been around for decades. He just couldn't believe it. And that's in part, I think, where this narrative that, we're funded by, shadowy, to the tune of billions of dollars from some shadowy
right-wing person. Yeah.
I mean, it's just a load of rubbish, and none of our, Kate and Bev have worked practically full time for LGB Alliance, tirelessly since 2019. Neither of them have ever received a penny. They do it all for free. They volunteer because they are semi-retired and they've got the time. None of the board is paid. We've only got 3 members of staff who are paid, and everybody else is volunteers. And we've got so many volunteers.
Great.
It's just amazing. Yeah, it's a brilliant organisation. It really is. it's kind of shaken things up, and we like it that way. You know?
Well, reality prevails, right? And you're definitely not a hate
I think
group. So I wish I was. I just wish I was there to see them stand up in court. It sounds funny. Well,
it was hilarious. The best was,
go on.
The John Nicholson, the MP, who had clearly hadn't been briefed by his barrister as to what you could or you couldn't say, and he stood up and said, and was being asked a few questions. He said, "Well, when do I get to say my piece about what I think about them?" And the barrister said, you don't get the chance. It's not a platform where you get to read a speech. And at one point, the judge wanted to break for lunch, and he said, "Well, can't we do it now? I'm a very busy man." I mean, crazy. It was eye-popping to see how ill-prepared they were for a case that they had instigated themselves, and which cost us $250,000. It must have cost them the same as well. So, yeah, what a waste of money.
Did you crowdfunded that?
Yeah.
Wow. And when was that? Last year, or?
It was 2 years ago.
Okay.
And, wow. But it took a long time for the verdict to come through. Glad
you got through it.
Yeah, I mean, it was. We were elated when their action failed, but it's still tinged with this sort of thought that, God, all that money and all that time, what could you do with that £250,000?
Yeah. Well, it's really nice speaking to you and seeing positivity, because a lot of people I interview on the podcast, it's very kind of doomsday on these issues. But
I do feel positive. We're getting there, don't you think? I think
100%.
I can definitely feel the change. And I know there's like a couple of steps backwards every now and then, but ordinary people are waking up and seeing that the LGB and the TQ plus are two different things, both deserving of their own organisations and support and, whatever, but they're different. And I think that is a real breakthrough for us.
Yeah. Well, if you like, we can look at one video from a lovely trans activist talking about the LGB Alliance before we wrap up.
Oh, I'd love to see that. I'm sure is it heartwarming? Is it a nice one to end on?
Oh, 100%.
We look forward to the day we can #reclaim pride for the gays and lesbians for whom the event was originally established. This is very wrong. They should not be called the LGB Alliance because they also do not give a shit about bisexual people. They don't really care about gay rights either. It's just all about getting rid of trans people. You can't reclaim something that was never altered in the first place. Like, there is no difference. Pride has become bigger and safer as society has accepted the LGBT plus community, but they were not just started by and for cis gay people. There are a lot of trans people involved. There are a lot of bi people involved.
What do you think of that? Does it make you angry?
No, not really. I feel sorry for this girl. I mean, she's a lesbian, absolutely in flight from the idea of being a lesbian, and
very
also,
influential.
There's tons of, we've got in our policy team, and in our our volunteers who help to run the organisation. We've got loads of bi people, and if people want to look on our website, in fact on our YouTube account, we've got a really good film that we made, Bisexuals Bite Back, with some of our bisexual supporters. So that's a load of rubbish. But this, I can see why I try and empathise with these people, and I can see why they hate us, because the truth is their enemy.
Yes.
And it's much easier to give your enemy a kind of a human face and to think that it's a nasty person that doesn't like you, rather than a concept such as reality. It's much harder to fight against truth and reality than it is to think, oh, LGB Alliance, they're absolutely awful, and pile onto them on Twitter. But at our conference, we have one of our speakers is Jamie Reed, the whistleblower.
Oh.
I don't know if you know about her.
Oh, I can't wait to meet her. That's great.
Yeah, she's coming. And obviously she worked in a gender clinic. She was all for the LGBT, kind of really positive about gender affirming care. She believed in it all. And then she saw what was happening with kids, and she just could not continue. And she had to hold quite a senior position, was there for a while. So she's going to be talking about that. But interestingly, her partner is a trans man who transitioned, began to transition 15 years ago, something like that, who's just announced yesterday that she is going to stop taking testosterone, has realised through this process that actually she was just trying to escape her own unhappiness with this physical transformation, and that she remains the same person inside.
Wow.
But she's just very worried now about the health consequences. She's got problems with her kidneys, she's diabetic. All these consequences of taking a very, very powerful wrong sex hormone for years, not good for you.
No.
But that's interesting. So I think that's going to be one of the best sessions at conference, like how, because it includes, views of a detransitioner, but also a whistleblower who was all for it. She didn't come into it cynically, like, maybe I did, or maybe you did, who knows. But it's interesting to hear someone's story from the inside, like what made them be strong enough, I suppose, to say, no, I've realised this is wrong. So she said that's going to be amazing, I think. But this person here, quite compelling in a way as a narrative, because she's quite bright and articulate and doesn't look weird.
Has millions of followers too. Very influential.
Yeah. Yeah, and sensible. I'm sure she's got lots of sensible things to say, and I hope that she is happy in her transition as well. Sincerely.
Yeah. Same.
So.
Would you like to see any more?
Yeah, go on, one more.
Being a lesbian doesn't mean that you have to be a woman. Like that, the term is fluid.
Some people would fight you in the comments.
I know. Oh, people are going to be so mad at me. I know.
I just watched a whole Jubilee video, and it was like conservative lesbians versus like leftist lesbians. And that was like one of the hugest points of contention was, can non-binary genderqueer people still be included in the lesbian umbrella? Conservatives obviously were saying no. Leftists were saying yes. And in my opinion, I think like labels are very personal to people. And I think they evolve and change, and like sometimes it like doesn't actually feel right for you, and then you're like, oops, maybe am I proving you right? I don't know. I did the same thing. Like I was like, I feel like I'm a bisexual lesbian, and like so many people got really pissed in the comments, and I'm like, honestly, you might have been kind of right. Like I don't actually feel that anymore, but it was part of my journey.
People get upset because they have their own definition, and they have been like, okay, well, my definition of lesbian is this. So if you're saying that you have a different definition, then that makes me wrong. So you must be wrong. And now I'm going to make sure that I'm going to change your mind because I don't want to be wrong.
Well, I can't help thinking that all these young people talking like this in such a knowledgeable way about sex are really quite sexually inexperienced, because I think at their age, we didn't spend a lot of time talking about it. We were out doing it and meeting people and having lots of partners and getting experiences, and they just strike me. When very young people talk as though they're hugely knowledgeable about a subject, and I just don't think these girls have had many relationships or had many experiences, and they sound naive and deluded.
Yeah, and I think, like you mentioned, the queer theory is there's no absolute truth, so it just seems so redundant that they just want they want every term to mean everything, because they want the term lesbian to just be, oh, well, it's just your unique impression of what it is. But then what's the point of having the word in the first place? One of them said, I'm a bisexual lesbian. Like, what are you gaining from that? I think I see it as now status among these people is not only having a label, but trying to claim that you have this kind of profound spiritual sense of gender that goes beyond the average person. And I think they do that to try. It's like a kind of religious, they're a religious figure in the cults. And
it's like a transcendence, isn't it? Above you and your bodily urges, which are really unpleasant to these people. They often give off a kind of a disdain about the actuality of sex or relationships. They're quite almost a kind of a repulsion around it. And they're transcendent, aren't they? That they are so in touch with the meaning of the words and the meaning of gender. Yeah, but they want to transcend their bodies. And yet these are the people who have awful operations to mangle them. So contradictory. It's really... becoming your true self, right? You were always a woman. You were always non-binary. Now you just have to get your body to match. Yeah, totally.
So, Kate, where can people find more from you, LGB Alliance, and what do you guys have coming up?
So, obviously the conference is the big one. So it's October the 11th at the QE2 Centre in London. It's going to be amazing. It's kind of really serious and really top quality panels. But then on the other hand, it's 600 gay people together and there's a big gay disco and some Eurovision. so it's kind of a really unique event. So people should come along to that if they can.
And I will be there as well.
Yes, it's going to be amazing.
I'll be making a video as well and doing some Vox Pop interviews. So if you are there and you'd like to answer a few questions, then please come find me. I don't bite. And hopefully I'll be able to pick your brain on a couple of things too.
Amazing. Brilliant. Thanks so much.
Kate Barker, thank you.
Thank you.